All right, so thanks for joining our CSPM monthly sync up. Just a few things. First of all, as a reminder, we've consolidated meetings. So this is now one meeting for all of secure and govern. So anything in any of that in the whole section, you can bring up and discuss here. It does mean that some of our product updates are a little bit beefier than before when we had them broken out into separate things, but I'll try to not bore you too much with rambling on for these things. So a couple things I wanted to cover in terms of product updates. We have a number of big features that are currently planned for 15.5. I know we've been working towards operational container scanning for what feels like forever. That's been in an alpha state for a really long time. The one merge request that was blocking moving this to GA finally went through. So things are looking pretty good for actually being able to move this formally over to GA. The way this will work once it's GA'd is you will have to install the GitLab agent for Kubernetes. And then you can configure that either as part of your agent config file, which would be if like the infrastructure team is setting up the scan, or you could set up a scan execution policy to enforce the scan. And so that would make it so that the security and compliance team could manage that policy instead of the infrastructure team. So that's really what we've been working towards. It's already 99%. But we're hoping to close out those last few gaps and make it officially GA, hopefully this release. The other big thing that's coming out is related to security policies. Part one of that is we've now launched rule mode for scan execution policies. So that's already turned on GitLab.com. We'll be announcing that as part of 15.5. And then the second thing is group level scan result policies, group and subgroup level. So those have only been at the project level up to this point. We're getting really close to turning that on. There is some risk it slips to 15.6, but if we're lucky, we'll be able to still get it in 15.5. So either way, coming soon is the ability to manage those policies at the group and subgroup levels if you're wanting to require approval on a merge request that has vulnerabilities. And then I'm not going to read through all of these in detail, and I think I'll just run through the titles of these and then turn it over to you if there's any one area that you want me to go deeper on. But some of the big things that we're working on going forward is replacing License Finder, re-architecting our dependency list. We're working on continuous vulnerability scanning, getting that browser-based DAST engine to GA, and then consolidating our analyzers with SemGrep. There are probably just a few of the bigger highlights. I've probably even missed over some others, but are there any of those items that you want to go into more detail on? Can talk through or demo, or if you're good, we can move on, and that's totally fine too.
I'm just looking through this continuous. So that does that cover secrets detection as well, or is that just vulnerability?
Yeah, so that continuous scanning would be specifically for container and dependency scanning, because those are things where the advisories change pretty frequently. So we're always getting new information coming into our advisories database. And we see that those analyzers typically are the biggest reason that customers run scheduled scans to rescan and rescan their project, trying to see if there are any new vulnerabilities. For secret detection, though, it's a little bit different because once you've pushed up your code, the only time your code changes is when you push up new code. So the only reason you would see new vulnerabilities otherwise is if we updated our rule set, which does happen. It's not nearly as problematic or frequent as the advisory database being updated, but otherwise you're not likely to see any new vulnerabilities for secret detection unless we had some sort of major rule set update.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking so clear when I said ask that. Sorry.
That's okay. But yeah, that's a good clarification. This is continuous vulnerability scanning specifically for container and dependency scanning, so it would not apply to any of the other types of scanning for this iteration anyway.
I think the group level group level scan result policy is useful, because I'd link to, and we can talk about it after, but kind of some of the challenges customers were facing in adopting Ultimate, and one of the items was like applying scans at the group and subgroup level. So hopefully that helps, mitigate a concern outside of using like compliance pipelines. But do you think that would be useful in terms of, securing at the group level? Are there any other things in the horizon for making other scanners available at the group level?
Yeah, so when we talk about security policies, there are two types of policies, right? There's scan execution that requires scans to run, and then there's scan results. So talking about each of those, on the scan result side, we are planning to do basically the same thing that we did with vulnerability check, but for license check. So we're working on moving that into the security policy editor, and eventually we'll deprecate and remove license check. So that's one area that we've got some improvement planned, and that would come with all of the benefits that you get with policies. You can manage it at the group, subgroup, project level. You've got two-person approvals for any changes. You've got the ability to separate that out, separation of duties for your security team to manage those separately. So we are looking at moving those over. In fact, the front end work for that is already in development. The back end work is actually going to be the lagging factor there, just given our current resource availability. So obviously we can't launch it without the back end, but we are at least starting that work now. On the scan execution side, we have support for SAST, secret detection, container scanning, and DAST. So we're missing dependency scanning and fuzzing, and technically we're missing license compliance as well. But given that we're planning to replace license compliance anyway and basically get rid of that analyzer, we won't need to add support for license compliance because it'll just become dependency and container scanning to do your license compliance. So yes, we do have support for dependency scanning on our roadmap. Support for fuzzing is considerably lower. Probably the next thing, in terms of like support in that regard, the next thing on the list would be adding support for custom rule sets for SAST and secret detection before we go and add support for fuzzing. So we are planning to build that out. It's just takes a little bit of time because we've got to add each scanner individually.
Right. Makes sense.
All right. Any other questions, comments, feedback on that roadmap? Thanks for sharing that, Sam.